Hello Internet, it's Daniel with Driving and Dragons, and today let's make a character. We're going to use a historic figure and use that to develop into a memorable and unique tabletop role-playing character using three principles. And those principles are anachronism, compression, and inversion. Using those three principles, we can take any historic figure, turn them into a fantastic tabletop role-playing character, and make your game have a little bit more edge to it. Stay tuned. Let's see what we can do. So it is a beautiful day here in the southern United States. We've got 68-degree weather, clear blue skies, leaves just starting to change colors. It is an absolutely wonderful day to be out driving around. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to say, I'm going to pull a piece of Southern history and see if we can make a fantastic role-playing game character out of a Southern historic figure. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest advantages to history is that historic figures have so much material available for you to figure out how their brain works, how they respond to certain situations, how they, what they've done and what has influenced their life. And that is really the core there. I mean, it is really kind of the lazy man's way to make a character in a lot of ways, because I can do this on the way to the game because I goofed off or was busy with work or whatever, got around to making my character. Especially didn't get around to writing any kind of backstory, and I just kind of figure out what I want to do on the way to on the way to character creation session, and it works out. Because if you have any kind of mind for it, even if you just kind of casually study, you can usually pick a bunch of stuff up, and you've got a tailor-made person that, with a few tweaks, becomes completely unique, but at the same time very memorable and very, very deep. Really, that is honestly where a lot of your fantasy-influenced characters tend to fall short, because you don't get the glimpse. There's no slice of life, really, with your fantasy characters. They have to move from event to event to event, and especially TV and movie. They got to move from event to event to event to event. They don't have time for slice of life stuff, and you can see that in writings, in letters, in various different secondary sources that make offhand comments about what different historic figures did, especially when you move more modern. So, let's talk about these three principles real quick, because truth be told, you can use these same three principles with a character that you got from an anime or a movie or a comic book or a fantasy novel or a mystery novel, whatever. You can use these same principles to kind of create a character. It's going to be a lot more obvious when you're not dealing with a real person. And then there's one other tactic that you can use to kind of set bury the lead a little further with your characters. So the first one is anachronism. Anachronism is literally taking something out of time. It is something that doesn't, like if you walk into somebody's house and you see a fax machine and a VCR, that's anachronistic. It's anachronistic because it doesn't seem to fit right. Or if you see you got a TV show that's set in the 1970s and everybody's all discoed out and whatnot, but a character pulls out a cell phone. Usually you see that in comedy a lot. It's like, this is an anachronism. It's humorous because it's out of place. Guy walking through Walmart in a toga, guy walking through the Roman Senate with a backpack, blue jeans, and a baseball cap on. These are anachronisms, the effect of the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. So what we do, when I say we use anachronism to make the character, we first take our historic figure and we pull them out of context. I'm going to use a Southern historic figure. I'm going to use somebody from the Civil War era, but I'm going to put them in a medieval fantasy setting, totally out of scope. that's going to make your more history-minded players, the other guys around the table, think more. They're not going to catch it as quickly because it doesn't quite fit as well. It's the same personality and the same character, the same persona, but it's in a totally different time frame that they don't associate the two with. The second thing I'm going to do is what I call compression. Now, compression works both ways, compressing and decompressing. This is the timeline of the character. If I'm making a first level character, I may need to compress major events and major happenings from the historic figure's life and compress those back into their childhood. Something that happened late in life to my character may need to happen earlier, because this is a first level character. He's not going to be 80 or 60 years old. The opposite may also be true. I may be rolling a higher level character, or a character that's more advanced, or is in a game that doesn't have a leveling system, for instance, may be an older character, and I may need to stretch things out and make them happen a little bit later to influence my character, especially if it's a factor of that character that I've tweaked a little bit. And the last principle is inversion, which is literally flipping something on its head, turning it around 180 degrees and making it the opposite of what it was before. And we're going to turn this upside down. Now, that can be a personality trait. I can take somebody who has a historic tendency to be a very calm persona and make them more aggressive, make them more prone to anger or more impulsive. Or I could take somebody who was known for being exceptionally cruel and make them exceptionally kind. Be careful, because it does influence the way that they would make decisions at times, which could pull them from a totally different character. You got to be careful if that's really a core part of their being, if you're really going to invert that. But even that works, because you just become the black version of the white, or the white version of the black. Or inversion can be inversion of an event or changing of a decision. So, for instance, there's a crossroads. Napoleon invades Russia out of his arrogance and his anger at the Russian Tsar. What if he doesn't invade Russia? That's one of history's biggest what ifs. What if he doesn't invade Russia? All right. That one decision changed history. Let alone Napoleon's life. That one decision changed the history of the history of the Western world. So you can invert that, or you can make any of those inversions, and how they more importantly, how those decisions influenced your character to flesh out your character and make them a little bit more unique and a little bit more yours. So let's start off here. What I'm going to start off with is a half-orc paladin is going to be what I'm going for. So half-orc paladin. And I am going to make this half-orc paladin. He is actually raised by the orc side. He is whelped on, he's a victim of war crimes and basically the son of a human slave, but is taken by the father, and because he has orc blood, he is treated sort of as an orc. He's a little outcast. This has made him very ornery. He's been very angry because he's had to fight for everything. But unlike your idea of somebody who's bullied his entire childhood, he bullied right back. He was just as aggressive and just as driven as his peers, and he fought him back. So he's used to throwing down. He's also used to knowing that he cannot get the accolades on the battlefield that his orc brethren can. He certainly couldn't fight the same way, because he may be smarter, and he may be a little bit more charming, and he may have a little bit more force of personality, but what he's not is as strong. What he doesn't have is the kind of ability to take damage, because his human half makes him weaker and a little bit more frail. He's not going to be able to be in these axe-swinging berserk rages that the other orcs do. So he becomes something more. He learns how to use horses. He learns to use quick lightning strike tactics, in and out. He learns how to think his way through a battlefield at a young age. Once again, though, he's a half-breed. And as a half-breed, he cannot amass any kind of recognition or wealth. He's not going to be a war chief. He will never be a great leader of thousands of orcs because he's not. He's always going to be the half-breed. He's got a ceiling that is set by society for him. So what else is there for him to do but find other ways to get the kind of recognition and power in society and wealth that he wants and that he needs for his family? So he becomes a commodities trader. He's smarter. He's got that winning charm, at least for orcs, he's got that winning charm. So he starts trading pigs, trading crafts, brokering deals, brokering treaties when it's absolutely necessary between the tribes and the surrounding cultures. And more than anything else, where is he going to be most lucrative in this barbaric society? He becomes a slave trader. And in that twist of irony, he comes from dirt and he raises himself to the highest ranks of orc society through what? Trading slaves. Well, all that kind of comes. Now, one important thing to think about him is when it comes to slaves, as vile a practice as it is, he kind of has he has a detached humanitarian view to it. On one hand, hey, better me than somebody else. At least I have a human side. At least I'm not as brutal as the people who could get them. At least I'm going to be able to sell them for more, and when I sell them for more, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be better cared for by whoever gets them because of what it costs to get them in the first place. And does he have a hatred for these captured halflings and elves and humans and whatnot? Does he have a hatred for them? No, he doesn't. He just views them as a commodity. They are a lucrative trade. They are something that can be traded to and from. It's the spoils of battle. If they had won, the orcs probably would have been put to death. They could have been put to death. Instead, they're going into slavery. This is a way that he can advance, that he can make money. So, that's his background. And as a young man, this is what he comes up as. Then, there's a big war. There's a big war with an incoming human nation that is really, basically, it's a human nation that comes in and says they're sick of dealing with these orcs. They've been raided too many times. They're going to put an end to this. They're going to stop these orcs. And he fights with them. He takes his slaves to war with him. And he tells them flat out, he says, look, here's the deal. The humans come through, you're going to be free if they win. You fight for me, and I'll free you. Either way, you're going to be free at the end of this. But they got to have the men because the orcs are outnumbered here. The orcs don't have the organization, and they don't have the manpower to stop this human nation. But that's his deal, and he takes them to war with them. Humans win anyway, and he comes across, and now he's done. There is no more slave trading. Orcs are not exactly looked at in the best light, and he's in this what used to be orc lands that are now kind of captured territory, and something happens to him. Whether he's being chased by a lynch mob, whether he's going to be executed, and they just speak out. Some of his former slaves, actually step up to save his life and to save him from prison, to save him from being executed. He becomes a kind of a figure in the gray. He's not really entirely one way. He's not really entirely the other. He's given the opportunity to lead small orc bands in rebellion in this territory, and instead he decides to side with the humans and stamp out the practice. As a matter of fact, a former slave of his was a priest that was captured in a raid. And he learns from this priest about being, he learns about the gods, and he finds his faith, and he becomes a dramatic opposition to slavery. He hates it. He wants to stamp it out. He knows he can't be a preacher, and he knows that his past means that people really aren't going to listen to him when he stands up and says that slavery is wrong. But what they will listen to is the end of his spear. What they will listen to are the effect of these brilliant cavalry tactics that he developed, having to find a new way to show out in the orc hordes. Heck, the humans were terrified that he was going to be on the battlefield because he was in and out. He was so devastating, and he didn't fight like the other orcs, so they didn't know how to handle him. He can use that, and he can just stamp out the institution of slavery wherever he finds it, and he dedicates himself to a unification of the races and understanding to where the racial animosity is no longer a thing. Some of his personality traits include that he's quick to anger. Having to fight tooth and nail, it was always a fight when he was coming up. There was no option. He knew where it was going from the beginning. He's quick to anger. He's quick to wrath. That's one of his personality traits, and that is perfectly acceptable for a paladin. That is a personality flaw, that he has trouble with his anger. He's conflicted because he has to deal with the guilt of his past life and how he's going to make amends for it. He's got backstory. He could have a former slave who is not forgiving, who has held that grudge against him his entire life, where he has to confront what he did in the past, and he has to fight against a monster that he created through his, if not his cruelty, his apathy. And now you have a character who has a fully fleshed out personality, who has a backstory that is real, who has reasons for why he's good at what he's good, and is going to stick out at your table, and your GM is going to love him because he's just rife with backstory. But what you've also done is you've taken Confederate cavalry general Nathan Bedford Forrest and turned him into a tabletop role-playing game character. How was he first level, though, with all this experience and stuff? Well, he doesn't have a ton. We've compressed everything into his until he's about 20, 21 years old. And even at first level, keep in mind, in most fantasy role-playing games, you're in kind of an epic fantasy setting, and your player characters are supposed to be a cut above everybody else. They don't have to be 50 steps above everybody else, but they have to be a cut above. So we compress a lot of everything he has into a young man. And Bedford Forrest, to be honest, he was a private when he joined the Confederate Army, and he was a general at the end of the war. His military career was only a couple of years. But he was a brilliant cavalry commander. He was also a slave trader. That's how he put food on the table. That's how he took care of his family, all his brothers and sisters. If I remember correctly, he had a parent that died young, and a mother he had to take care of, and slave trading was lucrative. He learned how to horse trade from his uncle, and slaves were worth more, and he never had like the racial superiority aspect of slavery. He never looked at it as, oh, you're super inferior, so, get down there, boy, I'm the superior race. No, it was simply, this is a commodity to trade. Now, Bedford Forrest, in the much, much darker part of his history, and the part that's, for many, very unexcusable, he was the original Grand Wizard of the KKK. He was the original leader of the Klan. They recruited him to be the Grand Wizard. But by late in his life, he renounced the Klan and even was chastised by former Confederates for speaking at basically black civil rights events. being invited by black organizations that were fighting for their rights, and stepping up and saying, hey, look, we got to put this behind us, and we have to understand that we're all Southerners, and we need to look out for each other. We have a society, we have an area of the country that we have to rebuild, and it doesn't help us to fight each other. It doesn't help us to try and hold on to these old ways. We have to work together and do what's right for us as Southerners. And that was what he came late in life. So what have we done with him as a character here? Well, we've got our Paladin, and we've done it by having him renounce the Klan very early. We've compressed that deep into his life so that it happens when he's a lot younger, and we've inverted it. Instead of him becoming a grand wizard, he repudiates it from the very beginning, and he may as well have gone north and gotten with Ulysses S. Grant and joined his Department of Justice to stamp the Klan out with a ruthless aggression. So we've inverted that, and we've taken a very, very vile part of his character and turned it into his redemption arc, so that we've created this new character. We've taken his cavalry tactics and moved them into this era and made kind of a unique character, because now you're thinking, how am I going to use cavalry? How am I going to use my horse? Where is this going to play into the game? And even if I'm not on horseback, where are these quick strike tactics? How am I going to put this in with my party dynamics? How am I going to use this to help out? How am I going to interact with these other members of the party? We've given him these great wrinkles in his character backstory, these things that can be used for adventure ideas, these things that can take it a step further. And you're going to have to look hard to find Nathan Bedford Forrest in this character unless you're just a Civil War buff. Because let's face it, I could even walk down the streets here in Alabama and ask 100 people who Nathan Bedford Forrest is, and maybe 10 or 12 of them would be able to tell me who he is. Maybe 1 or 2 would be able to tell me anything significant about his past. I go back up to where my wife's from in Illinois, and I ask them. Most of them won't know who he is from Adam's House Cat. But even if I have a Civil War buff in there, I've inverted enough things. I've taken him out of context from the Civil War era into medieval fantasy, and I've inverted certain parts of him. I've changed some of his decisions in life, and I've moved him deeper into the racial aspect, and really made it a racial aspect as opposed to just different colors of the same race. And I've discolored him enough to where they have to really be looking for it. Instead, I just got this really cool half-orc paladin with a cool redemption arc, who has gone from something truly vile and being a slave trader to being a paladin, a paragon of virtue, who has these anger issues and this haunted past that comes back to him from time to time. And now we've got somebody who we can play with. What do you think? Who would you use? What would you change? What figure would you pick from, let's just say, the American Civil War? Who would you pick to turn into a character? And what do you think could be done to make that character work out? Let me know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.